you, Sarah, and thank you, Simon, as well, organiser, and Sam, who's been kind of herding Simon around. Thanks for coming and listening. So, yeah, I'm from Elusive Brewing. We're based in Berkshire. I'm a reformed home brewer, retired home brewer, but started out as a home brewer, and the hobby got very much out of control and became Elusive Brewing. And I thought, I looked at the schedule, the agenda of the talks that we've got, and you've got experts in malting, from hop merchants in yeast. So I thought, let's talk about things that make beer not taste like beer. Well, to a degree anyway. So we're going to talk about adjuncts and flavourings. And if you think about the ingredients of beer, well, actually, reluctant scooper, Simon Johnson was a beer blogger, beer Twitterer, highly entertaining chap. Sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but in 2012 he wrote a little blog post called the Craft Beer Manifesto, and he said actually craft beer's got 7 ingredients: water, malt, hops, yeast, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And actually it was YouTube, but this was 2012, and I've kind of switched in Instagram. He won't mind. Yeah, it's funny how the Instagram culture in a way is driven craft beer, and actually, if you look at the New England thing and the Iceman pours on Instagram, and with the kind of the meniscus above the glass, and like this is defying gravity, it's awesome. It's got 1 million grams per litre of hops, and that kind of Instagram culture drove it. And also, I think about Omnipollo. They're probably the kings of beery Instagram, and I've got a theory that Omnipollo can only use ingredients that have emojis. Otherwise, it kind of ruins their shtick, so they have to kind of stick with emoji sets. But yeah, it's kind of driven it. And actually, if you think about beer in 2012 compared to beer now, there's a whole raft of different things going on, and I'm drinking a Bakewell Tart Sour from Northern Monk, and you think about Bakewell Tart, it's what black cherry jam, or cherry jam, coconut almonds. You can taste them all in here. It's pretty incredible. Recommend giving it a try. Brian might pop in and we can ask him how he did that in a bit.
I was talking yesterday, he's pissed off that they've called it Bakewell. He wanted the full list of the stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about a beer that we brewed called Bermuda Triangle Holiday Home. And in true collaboration fashion, the name came first. The name's the hardest bit when you brew a collaboration beer, for sure. And the name actually is from a friend of mine, Natalie Davey, who works at Camden Brewery. And we're out for a friend's birthday crawl. And she was, I forget what she was talking about things being unattainable or invisible. She said, well, it's like owning a holiday home in the Bermuda Triangle. And I was also with Tom Harrison, who then was brewer at House Brewery in North London. And he said, that should be a beer name. And we're like, we're going to brew that beer. And we're like, well, what would you associate with the Bermuda Triangle? We're like, well, it's beaches, it's Caribbean islands, it's, So we started to envisage the beer that's kind of tropical. It's like a sunset, it's fruity. And we settled on kind of a pina colada pale with coconut and pineapple. And we think, well, and the colour of a beach sunset. Okay, we almost got there. So you think about, like, how can you attain that sort of flavour? Think about this cherry Bakewell sour. There's different ways of imparting flavour into beer. And I think the main thing, talk about the recipe. We're homebrewers here, so we can get into a bit of detail on that. But it's like layering flavours. You've got different parts of the brew in which you can infuse or impart flavour. And to get a good result, you need to really attack it at all of those layers. This recipe here, so it's a really simple grist. It's a straightforward pale. I like a bit of Munich in my pales, that kind of dextrine type malt that just leaves it a bit more body, maybe a slightly higher final gravity than pure pale. So it's low bitterness, 20 IBU Magnum. And then we get into like the flavour that we use a combination here of hops, coconut and fruit. And in this case, toasted coconut. that we added at the end of boil, and then reset down through the coconut, through the plate back in, try and get that kind of effect of moving the coconut around. Added some mandarina, again orange, associated with a pina colada in a way, with that kind of fruity citrus vibe. And then we added, on day 7, end of primary, some pina colada tisane. I'll talk about tisane if you've not heard of those in a minute. And some mosaic, again layering that tropical flavour. So, you know, it's like taking, what's the, well, we'll move on, like what's the objective you're looking to achieve with your beer? Consider the colour, the flavour, the aroma, and the mouthfeel. And all of those things you can attack from at every stage of the brewing process. So when you're thinking about designing a wild and wacky beer, then, you know, think about each stage. And we'll start by talking about the grist and the mash. So I gave it, you think about malt, people talk about a malt base, a malt backbone. And I think I kind of see it more as a palette, like it's upright, it's looking at you, it's not underneath everything. And it's kind of, yeah, defines a palette to paint flavours onto. So obviously I mentioned with this beer that we went for a fairly classic pale grist, but for example, we recently brewed a chocolate stout. And at that point, you've got options in the grist to start to contribute those flavours. So you think of a well-made, chatting to Chris about, you know, chocolatey porter. You can start to layer those flavours in, selecting some nice crystal malts, maybe look at the roasted element, you go low on roast, you keep it quite sweet, a high FG, and it will contribute those kind of flavours. But other flavours you can get from malt, honey, caramel, toast. And yeah, and you could also add adjuncts to the mash. When we brewed the chocolate stout, I don't know if it really had much effect, but it was good for Instagram. Added some cacao nibs into the mash. And you know, you taste the wort after that, you think, well, I've just spent 30 quid on cacao nibs. Does it add any effect? I don't know. But you convince yourself, yeah, I was really chocolatey. But it's an option. So you at the very first stage of work production, you're thinking about the finished product. I've even heard of breweries. There's a brewery called Bear County in Peterborough. Loves brewing some crazy stuff. And he's even, you start to mess with your water. Right, what can we infuse into the water? Which is, yeah, that's kind of pushing things a bit, because then you've got to think about your chemistry and your pHs, but he's brewed beer with coconut water, like kombucha, fermenting his hot liquor, like crazy stuff. Like, don't rule it out, but yeah, don't, you know, be prepared for the odd quirky result there. But, you know, we've not really talked about water here, but hey, you know, if you're going to brew a wacky beer, that's an option. So the malt, yeah, we're defining the palate, and that's the start of your kind of creation of that flavoursome, wild and wacky beer. So boiling. So boiling is great for extraction of flavour. Put hops aside for a minute and think about, you know, think about spices and, you know, the process of boiling, you're at a very high temperature, 100 degrees-ish, you're moving, it's a rolling agitation, so anything you put in there is going to move around, and it's going to, you know, extract that flavour from it. So particularly when you're working with spices and certain fruits, peel and zest, hard things, I don't know where I was going with that. Things that are hard can become more malleable when they're at boiling, you know, boiling point. So yeah, I guess some spices would fall in that category, like, you know, coriander seeds and so on. If you boil them, you might get a bit more out of them. Do you think about transfer? We brewed a beer with burning soul, there's some coconut, and yeah, think about that. You've got to get the wort out of the copper when you're throwing crazy nonsense into it. Hops are one thing, but if you get something really fine that settles as a film onto your filter, that can be a long day. So do think about that. One little tip about spices is probably, you could probably go and read a cooking book and imagine Delia Smith saying, you know, you can always put more in, but you can't take it out. So with spices especially, be really careful if you're going to put stuff in the boil. I guess anything you're putting in the boil, it's a one-way street. You can't adjust the level down. So do think about that. I brewed a black saison with some, Chris knows the story of this one, but we were fanboying Judas Yale from Montreal. for a beer called a Sekimicho. And we're trying to guess the spices in this beer. So it's cardamom, it's coriander, it's all these things, and we kind of chucking them in. End up with something that's quite strange. Went to meet the brewer where the chap was there and presented him with this beer. Told you it was a fanboy thing. And he was a French Canadian and very French. So we brewed, and Chris and Emma brewed one as well. Like, brew this beer. You know, we try to guess the spices and we reckon it's this, that, and the other. And he just shrugged and goes, "No spices." So a little bit off the mark. Turned out it was his yeast that he wouldn't tell us about. Some magic Saison yeast that gave all this kind of herbaceous character to the beer. But yeah, you can't take stuff out. Put it in the boil, it's there forever. Think about that. Fermentation is probably the most popular place to add flavour in. If you think about Brian's here, we got your Bakewell, cherry Bakewell. I mean, was it puree? Was it different? And you got coconut, is there? Almond?
Yeah, almond.
Yeah. So you probably add in those at different stages, like bright fermentation. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Sugars and fermentation, non-fermentables.
Yeah. So yeah, fermentation. Fruit puree, typically, I mean, on a commercial scale, you can buy them aseptic, so not so much of a risk. You dump the whole thing in PA, pour it in, get gloved up, pretty low risk. I think on a homebrew scale, you can probably buy like the cocktail stuff that's real fruit, or buy some fruit, or you can make your own puree, even make sure you pasteurize it and so on. Fruit zest, zest is good for fermentation, like you've got that activeness. You know, roll. If you ever looked at a fermentation through a glass window, we used to have a Grundy tank with a window, and I didn't appreciate how vigorous fermentation is. You know, so that's all kind of moving around. Cacao, good for fermentation, good for post fermentation as well. Yeah, but I guess the main thing is consider sanitation. It's a good stage to add things with sugar in, obviously, because they're going to ferment out. And not leave you with issues at packaging, but stuff that's going in primary especially, it's a real quick way to ruin your beer and introduce an off flavour with it. So yeah, a lot of people like putting like wood chips in at the end of primary. I've ruined beer like that myself before. You know, steam them, bake them, do something to make sure that they're kind of free of bacteria. Packaging. Anything in packaging, Brian, with this beer? Anything in bright tank or packaging? No, okay, so packaging, it's a really good way of adding flavour because you've got a really accurate degree of control. You know what the finished beer, or at least fermented beer, tastes like at that point. So you can think about, what do I need to add to this beer to help me reach my objective? With the chocolate stout we brewed, at this point we're adding some liquid chocolate extract, product called Chalaco, things like that, so you can boost the flavour. So be careful, yeah, natural flavourings and extracts. In fact, there's a couple here that I grabbed off the malt miller, if you want to just grab one of those. Pass that around and have a sniff. There's a raspberry and a peanut. So these are natural extracts that you can dose in to a finished beer. You go up to the malt miller stand, they'll let you dose it into a clean beer, like a wit that you can just, you know, have a play with. Important in packaging that you're using stable products only. Like sugar content, obviously not going to be good, because when you package, you're probably bottom finishing. You might be carbing in the corny, but you know that sugar might end up fermenting. So be aware of that. I definitely haven't done that before commercially. With some blueberry tea that contained a lot of sugar, as it turned out. So yeah, consider any sugar content. The great way of doing this, like draw a known quantity of your beer off from your FB, take what it is you want to dose in, be scientific about it. A little pipette with half a mil into a pint or whatever, and see what you get from it, and then work out your quantity and adjust it up. So a very simple approach, and I do like this because it gives you a really good degree of control. We didn't do this with the triangle. We've done it a few times with dosing in. We brewed a Tonka bean stout. Tonka's a really mega intense flavour. So if you're putting that in secondary, you're taking a bit of a punt. You can always take it out 5 minutes, okay. You can always take it out. If it's in a bag, you can hoik it out, of course, but by then you might have imparted too much flavour. But tincture has already got away. To make a tincture, take a clean spirit, vodka. Take your favourite spirit, rum, like rum in my pina colada, yes. Soak stuff in rum and then sling it in. Don't tell HMRC. Quick flick through some products in the last couple of minutes. So tisane, I mentioned tisane. We use tisane in the pina colada pale. Tisane is real fruit tea. It's made with real fruit that's been freeze dried. They are aseptic and they're sterile, so it's good. Made of real fruit and spices, and you buy them. This website here, we bought the pina colada from. Loran is an American company that makes, they call them bakery emulsions. Emulsions. I think like painting walls emulsions. Apparently, I heard that Omnipolo like these guys, so some pure kind of, look through their website and you might spot some familiar stuff. UK equivalent fruity flavours, really good naturally extracted flavour, great for dosing in. Summary, final thoughts. This is, for developing any recipe, work from known baselines. Don't try and reinvent the wheel every time. It gets boring when you get it wrong. Get to know the ingredients and what they'll add to the flavour and to the aroma. Give them a rub, give them a sniff. Less is often more, especially with spices. Don't be afraid of failure. It's part of learning to brew, and it gets more expensive when you fail commercially, but you do learn quickly. But you need to experiment in order to progress. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
Just one thing I'd say as well is that experiment as well before you go and chuck the stuff into your full batches, because your ingredients might behave differently once you've put it through boil or what have you. So lavender is beautiful and floral when it's sort of in flower, but once you chuck it in the boil for 15 minutes, you get more of a spice note to it. So experiment, boil stuff on the hob, keep tasting it every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I agree, and do it with water rather than wort maybe. See what you get into water when you boil it. It's a very good point. Any questions, Sarah?
What's your favourite recipe in your book?
Recipe. We should talk about the mistakes. It's embarrassing. Probably pale fire, pressure drop. It's a bit of a go-to staple when you see it in London, and very straightforward pale beer, but completely delicious. Would recommend that one. Any other questions? Thank you. I'm around all afternoon if you do. Thank you so much.